Now let's have our last speaker, Professor Kostas Terzidis. Kostas is a professor at the College of Design and Innovation at Tongji University and the director of a Permutation Design Lab. Previously, he was an associate professor at Harvard University. Now let's have Kostas.
Yes, let's.
Hello. Yeah, now you can share your PowerPoint.
And that I will. Okay. Hello, everybody. Let me see if I can make some sense out of all this nonsense. Well, when I was in college, it was a long time ago, I studied about quantum physics, and I realized that there's something strange about it. And it was attractive to me very much because I saw things that I didn't expect, things that were beyond my imagination. Many think of quantum physics as an area of physics, but it's really not about that. It's about a way of thinking. It's a mental state, really. You know, in quantum, this morning we had Antonino, professor from Fudan, and he was explaining the whole idea of superposition, where basically in a quantum mechanics, there is a strange phenomenon where a particle may exist and not exist at the same time. Now, this phenomenon may sound very strange to all of us, because how can something exist and not exist at the same time? But in a way, it is not so. This phenomenon may seem strange, but it's not. What do I mean by that? We may be experiencing this every day in our lives. How many times are we split between wanting something and not wanting it at the same time? Having something and not having it, being and not being. Now, the recent lockdown now that we are going through in Shanghai is such an extreme experience that demonstrates exactly that point. We are and we're not. We exist and yet we don't exist. We're about to go out and we don't. We have and we don't. Let me back up for a second here to give you a perspective of what I'm talking about. I would like to refer to a few recent events for you to understand what I mean. Well, before the big lockdown, there was a small lockdown, a mini lockdown, which I had a chance to participate inadvertently. What do I mean by that? March 9th, 2022. That was about 2 months ago. A few days before that day, a professor in the school here in Tongji asked me if I can give a lecture in his class. Without any thought, we decided I'll do it at 1:30. But that day I was a little bit late, so I decided, I told them that I'm going to be a little bit late, so I'm going to come around 3. And I did. And normally the class was about to finish at 5 o'clock, but I continued until 5 because, you know, I like to talk and we're talking and, you know, there was a conversation. It was going fine. And at that moment, we got a message from the school, an announcement that said that we have to stay put, do nothing, close the doors and wait. And that was the message that we got. It's required by the university that you immediately wait patiently and for further instructions from the superior. So I suddenly realized that I, as I would say, modern Oedipus, my luck led me where I didn't want to be. I didn't have to be there. It was just a matter of just random events. It was 1 o'clock. I said 3 o'clock. It was 5 o'clock, 5:05. And it happened. And I realized that the more I tried to avoid the situation, like Oedipus, the closer I got into it. So I was confined in the school for 5 days. Now, of course, I was also in the school with 100 other students, teachers, administrators, staff, a lot of people there together with me. My friend Filippo was also with me. I have to admit that my initial judgment was very wrong. I can say with a great amount of certainty, this was one of the best times I ever had in my life. I had conversations with Filippo. We had conversations with everybody. We had the best food in the world. I mean, I would love to live in this kind of environment here. We played games. We had like all kinds of sketches and movies, and it was the best time I ever had. And I thought that I was the worst thing that could happen to me. So I realized that something else is going on here that I am not in control of. This is us after the post-lockdown era. So actually, as a quantum person, I was not upset. I wanted to be there, and I didn't want to be there, all at the same time. Like a coin who cannot decide which side it is, I was right there in the middle of this situation. April 1st, 2022. 2 weeks later, the big lockdown started. Unfortunately, it lasted almost 2 months until today. Actually, I personally am in the lockdown. Opinions split. Many believe that the quarantine was a bad experience. Others believe the opposite. I'm in between, as usual. I believe it, and I don't believe it. Like a zombie during this time, I am and I'm not. I want the experience, but I don't want the experience. But one thing is for sure. The experience of the lockdown, if anything else, is quite didactic. During these 60 days so far, my wife and I wondered every day what would happen next day. In the beginning, we had no idea what's going on. Will we go out tomorrow? We didn't know. Will we have food? We didn't know. And here's some pictures over here that you can see the people and the different PCR tests that we took, and the food the government provided for us, which was a lot, by the way. We had no idea what will happen to us. Uncertainty, basically, I would say, was the main feature. But this uncertainty led us to a series of discoveries. We learned a lot of things in this period of time. We learned how to make use of everything we had available. This is the food that we made every day, different. I usually make Greek food. I ended up doing all kinds of different foods. My wife was combining things. We made all kinds of strange foods because that's what we had available. We invented new things, new recipes. We organized ourselves on the fly. Something came, we made it. And most importantly, we learned how to not complain for what we didn't have. Yet, one thing made more impression to me: the lack of control over the things in my future, and the last time salvation of everything. Somehow, we had no control of things. We were waiting for things to happen to us. And somehow, last minute, everything happened magically. As if things were saving us for the last minute. I discovered that the control of things did not belong to me, and that things were controlling me instead. What do I mean by that? Well, my wife always told me that the house chooses us. We don't choose the house. Which to me was very funny because, I come from a different culture. And I was like, what are you talking about? The house is like, I am in control of the house. She says, no, the house wants you or the house doesn't want you. It doesn't matter what you want. Bread. Making bread, which I have done a lot and I learned it, it's almost like a living thing. If you ever did any baking, you will know that, the whole dough process, the dough is sleeping, the dough is awake, the dough is relaxing, the dough is growing, the grower is ready, the grower is, all the time it is about something as if it is true. It has a life of its own. Also learn that onions and potatoes are not friends. They don't like each other. They're like enemies. As simple as these thoughts are, they have a primitive logic into them. The passive voice that is being used shifts the responsibility from us as living beings to them as supposedly inanimate objects. So an idea occurred to me. What if things have a mind of their own? And what I mean by that, not that the actual materialistic things have a mind of their own, but the systems that they represent have a structure that actually is capable of making decisions within their domain that actually affects us without us being aware of them. In other words, let's put this in a little bit more easy to understand terms. What if ideas are not invented, but discovered? It's very simple to grasp this idea if I give you some examples. Is random something that we invented? If we did, then how happened we have no control over it? How happened we cannot predict it? So obviously, random is not something that we are in control of. We never invent random. We discovered it. How about geometry? How about permutations? How about rules? Did we invent them? Or were they always there waiting for us to discover them? This view of things, along with this controversial quantum mechanical state of mind, led me to two experiments. Okay. Let me start with a few observations. Okay. Somewhere in the middle of the lockdown, with the infinite time that I had at my disposal, I watched with great interest the televised trial of the divorce and defamation case of Johnny Depp and his ex-wife Amber Heard. And of course, apart from the gossiping, which was a lot of gossiping, what was interesting to me was something else. Both of the parties involved in the case are actors, and in fact, very well known and very good actors. The problem is that the better an actor is, the more successful he or she is in hiding the truth. The whole point of acting is to present something or to pretend something that is not necessarily true. The better an actor is, the more credible he is or she is in presenting a lie as a truth. In this case, however, we have a problem. It's a legal problem because the truth is hidden in the acting itself. So the logical solution to that is to get a third point of view, or even better, the most reliable way that would say in a legal term, if we cannot determine who is and who is not acting and who is not telling the truth, is to bring the evidence, right? Yeah, good. Well, the problem is that, however, the even within the elements, even the evidence elements, they could also be acting too. Elements such as security cameras, recordings, SMS chats, videotapes, audio tapes can all be altered to hide the truth or to show a false situation as true. Therefore, in this case, the protagonists of the trial are unreliable. Also, the facts too. I wouldn't trust the facts. I wouldn't trust the actors either. The trial itself is a trial, and it's not a trial. It is, and it's not. Exactly. So since humans, either as actors or data processors, are unreliable, all that remains to shift credibility to is to the other side of the fence, which is the objects themselves, that is to artificial intelligence. For example, a deep fake of a famous person confuses the audience so that it is impossible for anybody, including the expert, to be able to distinguish the difference. And even worse, the programmer who created the deep fake, even they cannot predict or control the behavior of their own program. The only way to verify the authenticity is to use another program that specializes in counterfeiting. In other words, humans, as inventors of things, distance themselves from truth. And therefore, it is only the machine with its own algorithms that now is the only true arbitrator of truth. Experiment number 1. I had a chance again to see my old movie, True Lies. Very interesting movie by David Byrne. And as I was watching the movie again, I saw at the end of it something very strange. At the end credits, the last frame of the whole movie, which is this one over here, there's a sentence at the end. There. And it says something very strange. If you can think of it, comma, it exists somewhere. I have no idea why it's there, but it struck me as something very, very interesting. Why was it there? What does it mean? And why did I notice it? Since it was at the end of the movie where everybody leaves the theater anyway. So I was thinking about it a lot, and I decided to use it for my experiment. So what I did is I used that sentence and I broke it into words grammatically. And I used a random process to arrange these words in a different way. In a different way. Over and over and over, through all the possible combinations that I can do, since I can. Here are some of them. Some of them. 16 million. You can't see them all. I couldn't go through all of them. So what I did is I used a copy of my mind. I trained a system to make sense out of every sentence and come up with the sentences that make sense. Or rather, the sentences that I can distinguish as different. This is the sentence that came out at the end. If it can think of you, comma, you exist. That's a very profound sentence because it reverses the whole premise of the sentence. And it reverses in a strange way where the object, not us, becomes the true subject. We're not the subjects anymore. We are the object of observation. In other words, our existence, what the sentence is telling us, is that our existence is determined by it. The thing determines that we exist, as opposed to the first sentence, which we were the ones, the arbitrators of reality. We distinguish things. This said the exact opposite, something that I myself would never have thought of. But here is where it gets even more interesting. Since I am the developer, the software developer, it means that I also have access to the code, right? Since I wrote it. So here's the code right in front of you. It's 30 lines of code and it's all based on certain processes. You can see here the first one, or the first arrow, is a random seed. How do you make a random seed? I don't know. I just close my eyes and I type. That's how it came out. Am I in control of it? No, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just typing blindly on the keyboard. So that's the initial starting point. Then I put it into a neural network. a classificator, and I generate 3,000 random sentences with these words. Then, and I use Chinese because it's easier to make it, because it's one symbol only every time, and then I convert it back to English. And then I produce sentences that are based on syntax. And the syntax is very simple. Subject, verb, object, SVO. So every question, every clause is an SVO and an SVO. If I can, then you can. If I am, there you are, right? So it's like subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object. That's to make the syntax correct. And then I have that the subject cannot be an object and the subject cannot be an object. The same one cannot be the same thing repeated, because then we have the same repetition all the time. I am I, because I am I. That doesn't make no sense. And that the verbs cannot be the same, because we want to use two different verbs, because it is a possible connection. And that is actually what happens here. And then I train it, and then I run it, and then I got this. And the third sentence that you just see over here, if it can think of you, I am, meaning like I exist. So, but here is where it gets interesting. Nothing of these things that I use is related to me, right? So, random, geometry, permutation, rules, as I said before, are not mine. I'm just using them. So the system basically is producing a profound philosophical sentence as a response to a human sentence, again, that actually is much more profound than the original. And not only that, but it shifts the whole philosophical argument to its self. So, in other words, this is the sentence. So, as another actor, I am presenting something that is not mine. I am, and I'm not, the processor of knowledge. As yet another actor, I'm in a position to mislead the audience with a lie that I cannot control myself. And the question that I have to you, and again, it goes back to Mick's argument, who is the author in this sentence? Do you know? Because I don't. Experiment number 2. Another interesting thing during the lockdown, with the infinite time that I had at my disposal, again, I had the good fortune to reread the great book of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the novel Love in the Time of Cholera. In short, the novel is basically the story of a triangle, a Psenian triangle that is a woman and 2 men. In short, the story is about a woman who falls in love with a man when she's young, and her father takes her away because he doesn't approve the relationship. She goes out, marries a doctor, stays married with him for about 50 years, and then when her husband dies, she gets back with her first lover. That's the story. Of course, the interpretation of the story, as it is eloquently done by Marquez, is very, very important. But the structure of the story is very simple. It's a woman, 2 men, and a period of time in between. So I decided, what if I simulate this situation? Okay. So I build a system of moving particles. And I decided to observe one of them. Fermina is the woman, and Florentino and Urbino are the 2 men. So I'm going through the interaction with other people, most of which being trivial, but I keep the ones that actually involve them as my target. So the rules are very simple, extremely simple. All you see is that 2 opposites are attracted and 2 of the same are repelled. And then I have my triangles. So either it's Fermina with Florentino and Urbino, or Fermina with Urbino, Florentino, or a friend or a girlfriend. That's kind of like the possibilities. And that produces the number of possibilities of interaction with one another. So here is where it gets interesting. So this is the data on the one side. This is the description of the data. In other words, Roberto replaces Florentino. That's what happens here, right? It's very simple. That's the logic behind it. And then there's interpretation where I take it and I use it into a poetic way. Here's another one. And another one. Of course, the system goes forever. It's in a constant motion. It's still going on. I randomly choose to see only one of these actors and the relationships with the other ones as it is attracted or repelled by that other person. So the question is that I have is that as the system is going through, the story develops, continues. After Urbino dies, what happens later on? The system continues doing things. You can find more things and you can make up stories as you're going along. And also you can go back in time and find what happened before the whole thing started. In other words, as I say over here, what happened to the heroes after the end of the novel? What brought the heroes to the story before the story began? So it's important to mention here that in both cases, the intentions of the protagonists are not taken into account into the experiments. We don't care what their intentions, feelings, or interests are. We present the results regardless of the intention. Whether it's a human or accidental, we don't care. We don't attach much importance to the human nature because in any case, we can hide whether the prehistory is human or accidental without this being able to affect the result. I had to be the one to break it out to you, but the Turing test is long, long gone. In other words, nothing will change if we reveal who and what is behind the results because the result is always the same. What interests us here is the interpretation as a result. And yet, although interpretation is important to convince the audience, the inspiration of the interpretation of the story is definitely not human. So, one final thing that I would like to show, which is a very strange analogy. The Russian roulette, no pun intended. They say that guns don't kill. People kill. Weapons are just tools at the disposal of the people who use them with whatever intentions they may or may not have. This is not the case in the Russian roulette. There's no opponent in Russian roulette. The only opponent you have is yourself and luck, none of which you control. You play with an opponent that exists and does not exist. In a game that is a game and it's not a game. With a tool that you can control and you cannot control. Think of that twice next time you pull the trigger. Thank you.